Hey guys, you might be wondering why suddenly I've popped home to my office. Well, the reason is that although I've been doing the anchoring all day today at Event Leaders, is I wanted to learn myself how it felt to present from home and also to see how it compares to being live in the warehouse. This event, after all, as Dave has said already today, is basically one giant experiment in how we can make a live event exist online, and I, like you guys, want to learn as much as possible from this. That might mean certain presentations aren't as polished as other ones, but hey, that's fine because we're all learning in the process. So, my presentation is about something that's very, very important to me that I'm hugely passionate about, which is renewable energy in live events, past, present, and future. So, why am I so interested in this subject, and why did I choose this as the one thing to talk about above all else? Well, I'll start with a quick story. I started in events about 20 years ago. I've been doing production of every type and size in that time. And when I became a parent several years ago, I started taking a lot more of an interest in the way the world was, the way our environment was, and what the future of our planet looked like. And when I started to show an interest in that, I started to see things that made me uncomfortable about the way we're living, the impact we're having on the planet, the way we're using fossil fuels, and I even started to think about the way the world might look in the future in decades to come and realize there's a lot of problems. And when you start thinking like that, you start reflecting on what you're doing in your life and the role you're playing in the world as it is and the way the world's going to be. Now, events are a massive part of my life, and I looked at that aspect of what I was doing and realized that in my events work, I and we all have used a lot of hydrocarbons. We create a lot of rubbish waste. We do a lot of travel. And while a lot of our work is very good, some of it doesn't necessarily drive that much value in terms of making the world a better place. So, with this knowledge that a lot of what I was doing wasn't good for the world, I thought, what do I do? And I thought, oh geez, should I get out of this business altogether and go and live in the woods or something? Or should I just sell up and get out of the industry altogether? But then I realized that that would be quite a cowardly thing to do, and it wouldn't actually be solving the problem. It might mitigate my anxieties around these issues, but it's not going to make any difference. So what I thought I'd do instead was look at what can I do in the position I'm in now. How can I use my resources, and how can I make a bigger impact beyond just me and my business? So, looking around the industry, one of the things that really grated on me a lot was these big, noisy, sometimes unreliable generators, which were chucking out this black smoke and burning through a lot of hydrocarbons. And then I'd take a look at these things and see how efficient they are. And I'm looking at these jobs where we're using maybe a 60, maybe 100, maybe a 500 kVA generator, big diesel engines producing energy. And I look at how efficient they are, and I see that I'm seeing these, 500 kVA generators with a load of like 20 amps per phase, basically nothing. And I realize that most of this energy is being used to make the engine run. Very little of that energy is being used to push electricity to power our lights and our sound and our catering equipment, all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, we're basically getting this stuff from the ground and we're burning it to keep itself burning, and only a tiny amount of that's actually going towards doing what we love doing. I thought, well, that's not cool, that's a problem. Maybe we can fix that. So then I thought, what else can we do? Where is our superpower? Where can we make change? And I realized that something we're really good at is innovating. We manufacture, we're proper techie, we love tinkering around with stuff, and we're pretty good with our electronics. So I thought, maybe renewable energy is something we can do. And maybe we can do it in events. So this is good, this is feeling good now. But then I think, okay, we might get rid of a few generators on smaller jobs, that's cool. Then I thought, you know what, there's something bigger here, Because in live events, we have audiences. We have a lot of people that come and look at what we do. They celebrate what we do. We're not really that hidden. What we do is very visible. So I thought, maybe there's a level above this. Maybe we can have influence that's bigger than we are, so we can change other people's perspectives. So then I thought, okay, renewable energy on events, let's make this part of what we do, core to what we do, and really drive the education and the awareness around that. So that's my background in the context of renewable energy. So let's talk about our current situation, where we're at in the world as of now, April 2020. Ain't going to talk about the virus. We talked about the virus enough. Let's look outside the virus situation. You know what? Let's think of a world 4 or 5 months ago, which was a bit different to what it is now. So we're in a climate crisis, right? The climate's changing. There's unanimous agreement on that. Species are dying. Habitats are collapsing. And frankly, the outlook of the world and our civilization is pretty bleak. We all know that. It's pretty undeniable. That's a problem we need to address. What else is going on? We've got this new generation of people coming through now. There's a lot of very woke, very conscious, very environmentally and community-minded people out there right now. These are people who ask questions, they look at supply chains, they take responsibility, and they hold other people to account as well. These are the people who are becoming our audiences. They're also the people who are becoming the fresh talent coming into our businesses. And this is important. I'll be talking about this quite a lot in this talk. Right, lesson 1. Make sure you've got water nearby when you're doing your talks. Okay, the other thing we've got going on is we're still using a huge amount of hydrocarbons in every aspect of our society. This is a problem. So that's where we're at now, right? Now, with events, how does that tie in? In the live events world, we're using a lot of diesel generators. I've talked about this already, and it's powering our kit. We need to power our sound, our lighting, our video, our camera systems, our catering gear, all the other stuff that goes on at events. And for many events, especially outdoor ones, festivals, pop-up, whatever, we're doing that with diesel generators. So that's a problem. So let's look at efficiency of energy, right? There's two sides to this. One is the production of it, making the electricity. The other side is the consumption, how we use it. And now let's look at what's going on in the world outside of that. In terms of consumption, in the consumer world, energy demands are going up and up and up and up all the time. In events, we've done a few good things. We're using much more LED lighting. We're using better audio systems, but there's not that much else going on in the events world. So basically, in the consumer world, the business world, and the events world, energy consumption is basically going up the whole time, okay? So we need more energy, more energy. Now, the other side of that is the production of energy. Let's talk about what's going on in the big wide world at the moment. Now, I don't know if you guys know, but in the UK, we're one of the best countries in the world for renewable energy on the grid. Just yesterday, as in today when I'm talking, I looked on gridwatch.co.uk, which gives you live data of where all our electricity is coming from. And at about lunchtime today, it was 51% was renewable. That means that over half the energy that we're consuming in the UK right now is from solar farms and from wind turbines. That's a really big deal. Now, bear in mind, we're in a country that's pretty overcast and isn't actually as windy as other places, yet over half our energy is from renewable sources. This is one thing to be really, really proud of. Meanwhile, we're using virtually no coal. 30, 40 years ago, our coal consumption was off the chart. There's basically no coal usage anymore. So there's some good stuff going on in terms of our production of energy in the real world. In addition to that, there is massive uptake of solar PV on a widespread level. It's not like it's just solar farms and that's all that's happening. A lot of houses have solar PV. A lot of warehouses, including mine, have a lot of solar PV on the roof. So we're seeing widespread adoption of renewable power in a micro sense. So also something to be pleased about. It's not all doom and gloom. Now, events though, how are we doing? So what's happening in events now on the efficient, sustainable production of electricity? Okay, so we're seeing a lot of biofuel. For those who don't know, biofuel is when you make a fuel which you can substitute for hydrocarbon fuels like diesel, and you make it from crops such as maize or sugar canes or rapeseed or whatever, okay? So this is not hydrocarbons because it's not pumped from the ground, but you can burn it as though it's the same thing. So basically they grow crops and they put it through digestive processes and it makes things like ethanol that you can burn. So this sounds good, right? We're not releasing carbon from the ground. And you could say it's carbon zero because these plants sequester carbon from the air and it puts it into the plant, and then that carbon can be re-emitted again through the burning process within a combustion engine. So sounds good, right? But there's another factor to this we need to think about, and that is that a lot of these biofuel crops are being grown on land that might be used for other things. So we have to ask what other things were being grown on that land. It might be that we're taking away land from food production, which could be food that poorer nations need. It could be that we're taking land away from cattle farming, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on your opinion. But there also have been some strong anecdotes of land being used for these biofuel crops that was previously rainforest. So at that level, you've got to ask the question, where did the biofuel come from? And if it came from the worst possible place, are you happy to substitute a rich, unrepeatable climate and habitat you can't get back of a rainforest? Are you prepared to substitute that for some sustainable fuel? I'm phrasing these as questions for a reason. I'm not actually saying anything specifically. I'm asking questions because I want to encourage all of you guys to ask questions as well. So when someone says, don't worry guys, it's all good, we're on biofuel, ask the question, what biofuel are you using? Where did it come from? Which part of the world? What kind of land was it from? And these are the questions that the woke generation are going to be asking. They're interested in their supply chain. They want to know where it came from, who was impacted, what was there beforehand. So ask the questions, think about biofuel. Now, there's another side of biofuel as well, and that is that sometimes people are reusing things like vegetable fats and oils. So what is that? When people use oils for cooking, like deep fat frying and so on, those oils might otherwise get disposed of. So what's happening is they're being processed and cleaned, and they're being repurposed as a fuel. So this is great. It's a second use, or an upcycle if you wish, from one use to another use. The first use, it would have gone into some kind of waste processing, but the second use is now for fuel. So this is quite a positive thing. But again, you still got to ask, where did it come from? What was the impact? Is it all just ex-catering vegetable oil, or is it perhaps from some kind of biofuel mix? Ask the questions. This is better. This is a lot better than using hydrocarbons, but it's still not perfect. There are still issues around carbon emissions, and there are issues around particulates being sent out. So that's what we're doing in the events world with renewables right now. Basically. Now, I want to touch briefly on hydrocarbons because I've talked about them a lot. And sorry if I'm being patronising to anyone here, but let's talk about these diesel generators. Diesel is a hydrocarbon that comes from crude oil, which is pumped out of the ground. Now, that's been a process we've been doing for well over 100 years now. People realised hundreds of years ago there's black stuff in the ground, you dig it out, you set it on fire, it heats up and it expands. And that's basically been the premise of the way our civilization's developed for the last few hundred years. In the last 150 years or so, we developed the internal combustion engine, which is what a diesel engine is. I want to make that point so you guys realize that this thing that's at our event sites producing our electricity fundamentally hasn't changed for 100 years plus. This is really, really retro technology. Now, on that front, a lot of people will say that diesel generators are efficient or cheap or good value. They'll use those words. But it's important to realize that this is not a good system. This is not an efficient system. It's unbelievably inefficient. I'll tell you a few reasons why. One is diesel generators and all internal combustion engines produce a lot more heat than they do mechanical force. They're better heaters than they are engines. The other thing is that the process of getting it from the ground to mechanical energy is a very long, drawn-out, inefficient process that requires a lot of energy in itself. The other thing is that most of the time when someone refers to a generator being relatively cheap or efficient, whatever, they're not considering the environmental impact that's being made on the particulates and the carbon that's being emitted from that generator. So what we've got is a really inefficient system, which is really damaging, that we've just refined. So I often call these engines a very refined, inefficient system. So I'm hating on generators here again. I'm sorry if there's any generator companies out there, but let's be honest, this is all true. I invite anyone to challenge me on this. So back to events. We've done biofuel. We've talked about generators. What about solar PV? I'm a huge fan of solar PV. This is solar panels, basically. These things are amazing. They're cheap. You can get a 220 watt solar panel now for 60, 70 pounds wholesale. They're so cheap. They're so reliable. They last 20 plus years. And even after 20 years, they still work. They're just less productive in terms of their yield. So solar PV is fantastic. How's it going in live events? So a few examples, celebrating some big successes out there. We've got Croissant Neuf at Glastonbury. Love these guys. They've been powering their stage off batteries and solar panels for well over a decade. So far ahead of everyone else. These guys are amazing, and I celebrate what they do massively. Sadly, they're just one stage at Glastonbury Festival. Other than the XR stage we supported with SolCell, I think they're the only two stages that were off-grid using solar PV, and the rest were all basically diesel generators. Other examples. Shindig Festival near Bristol. Just last year, we powered 2 stages off-grid using solar panels and batteries. That was great. Also, Greta Thunberg's rally in Bristol a few months ago. That was a 30,000 person audience. Massive PA, completely powered from renewable power, solar panels and batteries. That was also done by my team as well. I'm really personally proud of that. I don't go on about our achievements very much, but that is something I'm genuinely proud of, and I'm proud to be proud of it and talk about it now. So that's how we're doing in events for renewable energy. It's not actually very good right now. So let's try and switch this up and be optimistic. Let's talk about the opportunities around renewable energy. And I also want to talk about the threats of not doing things. So earlier on, I talked about the woke generation. They're being quite critical of supply chains, environmental impact, social impact, and what is going into producing the events they're going to. I believe there's a threat here. I believe that this generation are going to start showing a very keen interest in how we as an industry are doing what we do. And I think there will likely be a level of boycotting soon towards certain events from these people. I think that the promoters and organisers of these events won't necessarily know what's happening. I think they'll see ticket sales drop off. And I also know for a fact, and I'll give you some anecdotes in a second, that people in the corporate sector and touring sector, if they're not acting in a sustainable, responsible way, they're going to start losing business to people who are. These are the threats. Don't be sustainable. Don't focus on your environmental responsibility, and you're almost certainly going to see a drop-off in revenues and profits, and it could even threaten the survival of your business. Now, I said I'm not going to talk about the virus, but let's touch on that briefly. We're heading towards tough times in our industry. There's going to be a lot of failures. I personally think it's going to be a total bloodbath. We all, to survive, have to be the best we possibly can be on every single angle. Excuse me. And sustainability is one of the things that we can do quite easily. I'll talk about that more again in a second. Right. Opportunities, though. Where are the opportunities around sustainability and around using the right energy systems? So, I'm going to tell another story now. Last year, a project I've always wanted to do came up for tender. The Western Bird Arboretum Christmas lighting. I've loved this event. It's great. It's really relevant to the West Country. Amazing event. People of all ages. It's trees. It's lighting. It's all the cool stuff. All the best stuff. They put out to tender through an ODRU portal, which means it's very metric based in terms of who wins the contract. We were up against about 25 other companies. We focused a lot on this one on renewability and sustainability and where our energy was being produced from, because it's authentic to us and we know that client's very motivated by these things. Now, in their tender scoring, 15 points of the whole tender score was down to sustainability. To cut a long story short, we won the tender, and when I saw the comparative point scoring across our competitors, we won it by 3 points. Guess how many points we got for sustainability? 15. We got full marks for sustainability. Had we so much as sneezed around that subject matter and not absolutely nailed that, we would have not won that job. Now that contract is worth almost £1 million, which for my company is a big deal, right? Probably for any company that's a big deal. So our conduct and our innovation around renewable energy swung us basically £1 million revenue. Even if you love your generators and you're not that bothered about this stuff, and I don't think that is any of you people, I think you guys do care, you can't ignore the commercial wins that can be achieved by behaving in a responsible, sustainable way. Now, the other one is image. Cast your mind back to when you were a teenager. Maybe like me, you're a bit of a nerd. You loved your kit, you loved your parties, you loved everything around technology and events and creating experiences and art and everything. Now, imagine a kid now who's like that. And they're looking for where they want to work one day, which company they want to work with, where they want to bring their talents and their energy, and where they're going to help drive revenue and profit and growth. Are they going to go for a company that's doing some really good innovation around things like renewable energy? Or are they going to go for the old school companies who are burning diesel like there's no tomorrow? It engages with the right kind of people. Now, in terms of engaging with the right kind of people, I've had instances where people actually who have been presenting at this event today have seen what we're doing, and I like to believe, Terry can confirm if not, I like to believe that they're inspired by our innovation and our forward thinking around things like renewable energy, and they think, you know what, there's a lot of good companies out there, but I want to work with those guys because they're doing some cool stuff. There's a very strong message to put out there. You got to remember, We're in a techie industry. We're in an industry that should be kind of cool and experimental and out there and fun and changing things up a bit. So do innovation, get involved in renewable energy, so you can try and make that statement to your client base. The other one is the audience. I've had many situations where people are working with us on events where they want to see renewable energy because that becomes part of the content of what we do. That might seem weird, but think about this, right? People go to events fundamentally to have experiences and learn new information, right? You go to a festival because you want to change up your reality. You want to learn about a different way of living, different way of interacting, different music, different food, all that stuff. You're also interested in where things come from. So things like a solar array at a music festival or even a conference or an awards show becomes part of the experience for the audience. It's part of the content. So there's a value add there that turns your technical production and your power production into the content of the event. And I think that's really cool. So in the events world, one of the things I love the most is the fact that we get the ability to share messages. And I think that we have a responsibility to use the platform that we've got to share messages around renewable energy. And I encourage everyone to do that. Now my sales pitch. We at SXS developed this thing called SolCell, which is the world's first deployable renewable energy power station. It's basically batteries and solar panels. The batteries come to site pre-charged from the solar panels, which this event today is being powered by actually from the roof of SXS HQ. We deliver energy from them, and on site we generate energy as well. Now, these systems we've built deliver about 5 to 10 kilowatts of energy, which is enough to power a good sound system or some projectors, maybe some lighting as well. And we really want to scale this stuff. And I compel you guys to please get in contact and let us provide the SolCell systems, even for free if we have to your event so we can get more traction and we can try and push diesel generators away from this industry as much as possible. If you're interested in SolCell, I've done a series of really short little videos explaining all the concepts behind it, including some of the technical language I use. I'm going to make sure there's a link in the follow-up notes to this presentation today. Please watch that video, learn the concepts, and please get in contact. I'd love to hear from people, your ideas, your criticisms, your challenges. Bring it on. Want to hear all of it. Now it's over to that presenter guy, Johnny, to ask questions to myself. This is interesting. I don't know how this is going to play out, but fire your questions in and we'll have a chat. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been an interesting overview of the past, present, and future of renewable energy and events. I hope it's made you ask some questions of yourself and your projects. And I really hope that maybe some of my kind of philosophical ideas might have resonated with you guys and made you think more about this stuff. Again, get in contact. I'd love to hear from you guys. And thanks so much for coming to Event Leaders 2020. See you soon. Thanks, Johnny. That was great. Going to answer some questions now, and I've also just cut away. I've also brought in the SolCell systems here. If you can cut the shot, please, Jordan. So I've got the equipment here as well, so I can answer very specific questions. We're going to do 15, 20 minutes of that, then stop for lunch. Okay, so first question, how can we motivate large festival organisers such as Glastonbury to do more? Seems like they're singing the song but not delivering. 100% agree. I would even use the word hypocrisy myself. They market themselves and drive revenue, value and massive profits off the back of their apparent do-gooding sustainability stuff. I'm all for that messaging, but it's got to be authentic. I feel that it's not authentic because they're not doing enough. So to answer your question, how do we compel them to do more? Motivate was the word you used. I think actually activism. I think what we have to do is hold people to account. So when people are giving it all the talk around the fact they've installed a few solar panels on a barn roof, draw attention to the fact that you're burning hundreds of thousands of litres of diesel, but you've made no attempt to put a grid substation on your site. Glastonbury Festival, I hope, is going to carry on for 50 years or more. Whatever they do now, they're going to see their money back. So my answer is hold people account, don't listen to their BS, question them on it, and just not be okay with it. If you're producing a stage at Glastonbury, and some of the people watching this now will be lighting designers, ask the question, where's the power coming from, guys? And if they're like, a couple of 500 kVA sets out back, it's like, well, hang on, could we use some renewables here? Maybe we could control just our lighting desks off batteries for a start. Before I rant too much on that, what you could also do is consider what is the base load of the generators. I know for a fact a lot of major festival stage will run their full gen sets overnight just to keep the lights warm and the lighting desks on. You can use a much smaller power system for that, such as batteries, to give you an uninterrupted supply overnight and turn off those big diesel generators. So we have the power to motivate and compel those people to do more. And the way we do it is to hold them to account, demand authenticity, and use the influence we've got to make change. Hope you like the answer. Next person, can solar panels and batteries made in a sustainable way? Very good question. I'll revert to the solar cell systems now. Josh, if you just cut across. So these ones here are valve lead acid batteries. My friend Jan from Bristol Batteries sorted me out with these. These were originally substation UPS batteries. Because that was a grid critical application, they have to change them out every 3 or 4 years. They were going to go to waste. So I picked these up essentially as scrap, yet they worked well. So they were going to go to scrap, we took them on. To me, that's fantastic because you're not creating any more production of metals in the process, so very good. At the end of life, they can be recycled to a certain level. I'm quite proud of that, I think that's good. But there's a big elephant in the room, and that's these ones here. These are lithium ion batteries. They're basically the same as the ones that you have in your mobile phones. There's massive issues around the way lithium's mined. We don't have data on it, and what I do know is quite anecdotal, but there are concerns that there's a very high environmental and human cost to the mining of these batteries. So I don't have an answer to that one yet. I'm looking closely at what the information is, and I'm really, really interested in what new battery technologies are going to come out. So is it sustainable? Moving parts, lots going on. Keep talking. If you hear things, tell me. And again, ask that question. Hold people like me to account who are using this stuff. How far are we from zero carbon emissions in the events industry and as a society? Okay, so let's talk about zero carbon emission versus carbon neutral. Zero carbon would suggest that we're not producing any carbon whatsoever. Just in the process of eating food, we're producing carbon. Digging a hole in the ground, you're going to produce carbon. Having a stove cooking, you're going to produce carbon. Carbon zero is never going to happen. Our planet produces carbon. Even if humans got wiped out tomorrow, carbon would still be getting produced. So forget zero carbon for a second. What we can do is go carbon neutral. That's where we produce carbon, but we're also doing things at the same time that sequester carbon from the environment. So for example, if we were doing a job for a person who's watching this right now in Madrid, we were aware that shipping our equipment out was going to emit X number of tons of carbon. So that's a bad thing, right? To be carbon neutral, we wanted to offset that by planting trees, which suck carbon from the air. So if we neutralize our carbon emissions, we can achieve carbon neutrality. That's a good thing. We can also go a step beyond. We can plant more trees that sequester more carbon than what we're producing, so our actions are creating an environmental benefit, an environmental value. I hope that answers that question. We want to create, this is a question, we want to create a sustainable tick list agreement for AV companies to adhere to. Can you suggest any good questions to add to this that AV should be doing? I think that's a really good question. I don't know who you are, anonymous, but thank you for the question. I think a really good starting point in your procurement process would be to say, what are you currently doing with your sustainability policy? We've done that in our business. See what they've got to say. They might come up with some interesting stuff. With our company, there's a 5-pillar policy that we're doing a lot of things, and Dave, if you can post that in the link, that'd be great. But in terms of what you can do with companies if you're not working with SXS, I would ask them questions like, what percent of your lighting is LED? How are you reducing your diesel consumption for transport? What's your logistics plan to minimize the number of vehicles? What are you doing internally to mitigate your carbon emissions? You're basically asking them to produce their policy and find out what they're doing. Whatever they come up with, I'd ask for evidence. It's all well and good to say we aim to offset our carbon. It's like, and how are you doing that? What are your actual actions? Stop it with the lip service. Give some actual real world examples. In the case of us, we'd invite you to come down to our land and see all the trees we've planted. I'd get you up on the roof to see our solar panels. You come see our battery rigs. There's real world stuff. So I think at the moment, it's not as simple as a ticks box or a 1-to-10 ratio thing. I think you need to engage a lot more and demand authenticity from them. If you have a supplier who you want to look at their sustainability, I would be really delighted to help out with that. Ask the questions, look at the data that comes back, and in that process, I'd learn a lot myself. Next question. Is it currently feasible to replace generators entirely with renewables for a large festival? I'll answer that with some examples. One I talked about a moment ago in my video was Greta Thunberg's presentation to Bristol. 30,000 people, overcast day, about 7-8 hours of content, completely done with this rack here, actually. In fact, let's get specific, right? This is the first system we built. There's about 14 kilowatt hours of
energy stored in this. This was pre-charged from our solar array, which is on the roof here, and it went to site. This one here is a lithium ion system with an inverter, also pre-charged. So that was an event for 30,000 people. 30,000, that's a pretty major event by any standards, was powered from renewable energy. We didn't need a diesel generator. Someone did actually say, oh, but there was no sun, solar panels, not true. It's like, no, you pre-charge the batteries from these solar panels, and if we can generate more on site, that's great. So can we run events without diesel generators? Yes, but it depends on what the event is. Now that gets onto a more complicated answer, which is where you've got to start engaging with your power process. So at the moment, the way people often do things is they say, I want a 200 kVA generator because that'll cover everything and it'll be fine and we'll be running at 50%, whatever, done. One less thing to think about. When you use renewable energy, you have to really start engaging with what is your power consumption, what is your use profile, how long are you going to run it for, and you have to start doing a bit of maths around what you actually need. If you do that, you can then find ways of using renewable energy, but also your renewable energy system will then define what production you can do. So you might look and say, oh geez, that main act, they want to come in with a massive rack of mole phase. You know what, that's not really going to work on batteries actually. So can we just change that up a little bit and use some different types of lighting? So you start having much more joined up thinking. You lose this demarcation of, I'm the lighting guy, this is what I want, and the power guy saying, lighting guy, what power do you need? It's more of a joined up thing. Have a chat. What effect do you want to create, artistic director? Hey, power guys, how much energy can you deliver? Let's find a way of making this work and have those feedback loops to each other to make it a more cohesive system. And that's what we're doing at SXS. Sam, how reliable has your system been? Is it less likely to go wrong than diesel gensets? Great work in the project. Thank you very much, Sam. How reliable is it? So it's good. There's a few ways to answer that. Technically, we haven't had any technical failures in these systems. In the prototype systems, we had some blown fuses and stuff in the past. We have blown up loads of batteries as well. That is part of the R&D process. These systems have been fantastic. At Greta's gig, at no point did I feel even remotely uncomfortable we were going to lose power. And you know, as an event technician, you kind of have this instinct that you feel like, oh God, you're that crawling feeling that maybe that amplifies a bit on the way out. Not anymore, in the early days. I never had that feeling. I felt this was really reliable. And the other question you were asking, Sam, was reliability. Yeah, that was it really, wasn't it? So is it reliable? Yes, it is. I would say on a personal level, when I put my technician hat on, podger on my belt, what would I prefer? Genuinely, I would rather these systems than a small diesel generator. Of course, big 100 kVA synced gensets are, you know, they're pretty rock solid. But for smaller stuff, I'd go for this stuff anytime. In fact, when I go and do these random projections or helping out people with sound systems in fields and stuff, on a personal level outside of my work, I would always take Sol Cell over one of those little diesel or petrol generators, absolutely. How does this work from a safety point of view if consumption is greater than recharge? Okay, so consumption and recharge, let's define that. So recharge would be the energy coming into the batteries, either from grid energy, from the solar panels here, or maybe the solar panels on site. They're feeding into the batteries are delivering energy. If consumption was higher than generation, the batteries just start getting a bit flat, basically, until eventually there's no power left. If that happens, Sol Cell can then kick in a generator and they can be recharged from a normal generator. But back to planning your power properly, if you do it right, you shouldn't really end up in that situation. Next question was, what power consumption are the stages you power at Glastonbury using? Right, so Glastonbury, we helped out the Extinction Rebellion stage, which is in the, I think, Green Fields or Green Futures area. Quite a small area, not massive at all. I would very much like to power a larger stage, and those guys I mentioned earlier, Croissant Neuf, amazing guys, they power a really quite serious stage. So it is viable to power larger areas, and people who've come before me have already done that to a really, really impressive scale. Next question, how efficient are renewables versus hydrocarbons? Okay, efficiency is energy in versus work done, i.e. how much stuff you put in versus how much stuff you get done. So people talk about efficiency of solar panels. They say, oh, they're only 20% efficient. Okay, so that sun that's firing down through the air hitting the ground, most of the time is doing pretty much nothing. If you can capture that and use it, you've essentially got no cost of anything coming in. So I would argue that it's almost like infinitely efficient because you're getting something from something that otherwise would have been nothing. Does that make sense? Bit of a weird concept. In terms of hydrocarbons, yeah, you've got to chuck loads of fuel in. Most of it gets turned to heat. A load of it gets used to make the mechanics turn around and heat the oil up. A little bit of it, not that much, gets turned into electrical energy. That's then transmitted and used for powering up lighting and stuff. So I would argue that renewables are vastly more efficient, but you could answer that question in a much more complicated way. There's our sustainability policy, which has just come up. If you want to read that, it's quite interesting. I would encourage anyone to please copy it, have it, as long as you implement it. If you can take one thing off that and adopt it, I invite you to take that part of the policy office. Have we got any more questions? Okay, cool. So let's talk about how SolCell works. These are the products. What happens is we plug the battery rack into the control rack, and then we plug the solar panels into the charge controller. And then this essentially acts as a power station. It's generating power from the sun, putting in the batteries, and it's delivering power to the event. This is basically the same thing, but it's our original first prototype, one of actually, still working. It's just a lot heavier, uses a different type of batteries. Have we got any more questions? Jordan's our producer. To Jordan, thank you, Jordan. We're doing this whole event with basically one technician pretty much. We'd do it a lot better if we had 3, but Jordan's doing a great job. Jordan, have you got any questions about renewables that I haven't covered yet? No?
How can they be used in conjunction with sort of corporate events and stuff like that? How can you start to bring in renewables for places that might already use grid power supplies and stuff like that?
Okay, so Jordan just asked, how would we use these for things like corporate events where you want to get some renewables on the event? The question I would ask, and this is sort of selling with integrity, is like, why would you want to? Because if you're in the UK on a sunny day, 50%, over 50% of energy is produced from renewable sources anyway. So if we're going to transport this stuff to your event in, say, central London, it's going to emit carbon just by getting it there, right? And if that's only going to mitigate the consumption of a bit of fossil fuel energy on the grid, it might not make sense. So you've got to look at each situation. If it did make sense, and it often does actually, these systems are really, really good to be used anywhere that you need power, especially exhibition spaces where they might charge you a lot for a 13 amp socket. It's sometimes viable to use one of these racks instead, and it often costs a lot less as well than hiring a 13 amp socket from certain exhibition centres. I mentioned no names. In addition to that, this system, being a massive battery, is an absolutely amazing UPS system. So UPS is uninterrupted power supply. That means that if your grid power goes out or someone trips a breaker, these things can keep delivering energy. So let's say you're doing a front of house position at a festival, or more our world, you're doing a major awards show or conference, and you want to make sure that gear keeps working no matter what. SolCell is amazing because you could run your front of house for days, potentially hours, potentially days off one of these racks. Have we got any other questions? Any more questions? Anyone challenge me on stuff or share with me ideas? What's your vision for how you'd like renewables to be in live events? Josh, have you got any questions? There is a cameraman here as well.
I guess how modular are they?
How modular is SolCell and other systems? Very. You can keep pretty much stacking up batteries forever. So these could eventually be like a 40-foot shipping container full of batteries, which would be pretty cool. I want to work to that point. In fact, if this system gets more commercial traction and people start paying for it, I would love to be able to invest in a really big megawatt-based system that we can deploy on a large scale and use it for bigger and bigger events, or even things like construction projects, military, whatever else needs energy.